In today's episode, we're looking at 5 employees who were eaten alive by animals while working, from a security guard who thought he could read a lion's intentions to a dive technician who skipped one crucial safety step in a shark tank. But first, we start in South Africa's Limpopo province, where one man's overconfidence in his animal instincts proved deadly. It was March 11th, 2015, and the night air hung thick and still over a private game reserve in South Africa's Limpopo province. The reserve sprawled across thousands of acres of bushveld, where acacia trees cast jagged shadows under a crescent moon. This wasn't one of the famous national parks. It was a newer operation combining wildlife protection with ecotourism that had recently expanded its big cat program. Malcolm Hensley had been working the night shift for 8 months. At 48, he was a former Marine who'd found his way into private security after leaving the military. Quiet and methodical, he took pride in following routines and maintaining order. His colleagues respected his discipline, but some had noticed his growing confidence around the animals. Malcolm often claimed he'd spent enough time observing them to understand their behavior patterns. The reserve's security protocols were straightforward: patrol the perimeter, check the enclosures, and radio any irregularities to the main office. Night shifts were typically uneventful, but protocols existed for a reason. The big cats were unpredictable, and even experienced handlers never worked alone near their enclosures. Lions are among Africa's most formidable predators, capable of taking down prey many times their size. A full-grown male can weigh over 400 pounds and reach speeds of 35 miles per hour in short bursts. Their night vision is 6 times better than humans, and they're naturally more active during darkness. Even well-fed lions will attack if they perceive a threat or opportunity. Their bite force exceeds 650 pounds per square inch, and their claws can inflict devastating wounds in seconds. Just after 2 a.m., Malcolm noticed movement near the lion enclosure during his routine patrol. The facility housed 3 lions in a double-fenced area with an outer perimeter and an inner containment zone. From his position on the main path, he could see something shifting in the shadows near the fence line. Malcolm approached the outer fence with his standard equipment: flashlight, radio, and pepper spray. The protocol required immediate radio contact with the main office before investigation, but Malcolm had grown comfortable with these late-night checks. He'd handled dozens of false alarms over the months. He entered the outer fence line without radioing his team. The beam of his flashlight swept across the enclosure, revealing a maintenance gate in the inner fence had been left open by the afternoon crew. The male lion, a 420-pound animal named Caesar, had discovered the opening and slipped through into the outer containment area. Malcolm found himself face to face with the lion in the narrow space between the 2 fence lines. Caesar stood motionless about 20 feet away, his massive frame silhouetted against the darkness. His eyes reflected the flashlight beam like amber coins. The lion struck without warning. Caesar launched himself forward, covering the distance in 3 powerful strides. His front paws slammed into Malcolm's chest, driving him backward onto the ground with crushing force. The flashlight spun away, casting wild shadows across the enclosure walls. Malcolm's radio clattered into the dirt, just out of reach. Caesar's jaws clamped down on Malcolm's neck and shoulder, his canine teeth puncturing deep into muscle and tissue. The bite force was devastating, crushing vertebrae and severing major blood vessels in seconds. Malcolm's body went limp almost immediately as the lion shook him violently, his powerful neck muscles snapping bone with each movement. The attack lasted less than 30 seconds. Caesar released his grip and stepped back, breathing heavily. He circled the motionless body once before dragging it toward a cluster of bushes near the fence line. Using his claws and teeth, he began covering Malcolm with leaves and debris. Instinctive behavior for preserving a kill. The next morning, the day shift supervisor noticed Malcolm's abandoned patrol vehicle near the lion enclosure. His radio calls went unanswered. A search team found his body partially buried under vegetation in the outer containment area. Caesar had returned to the inner enclosure through the same open gate. The investigation revealed multiple protocol violations. The maintenance gate should have been secured before the night shift began. Malcolm should have radioed for backup before entering the outer fence line. The reserve's insurance company conducted its own review, leading to updated safety procedures and mandatory 2-person teams for all big cat area inspections. Malcolm's military funeral was attended by dozens of former colleagues and reserve staff. His family requested privacy, but his brother spoke briefly about Malcolm's dedication to his work. The reserve established a memorial fund in his name, supporting wildlife conservation education programs. Malcolm thought he could read a lion's intentions and paid the ultimate price. For Wendy Caro, it wasn't overconfidence, but a simple timing mistake that brought her face to face with a hidden alligator. It was July 23, 2016, and the Louisiana morning was already thick with humidity by 6 a.m. In Breaux Bridge, a small town nestled in the heart of Cajun country, the Boudreaux family gator farm was preparing for another busy summer day. The facility sat on 12 acres of converted rice fields, where dozens of American alligators lived in carefully maintained ponds and enclosures. Spanish moss draped from ancient cypress trees, and the air buzzed with insects and the occasional splash of a gator sliding into murky water. Wendy Caro had been working at the gator farm for 14 months. At 27, she was a certified veterinary assistant who'd taken the part-time position to gain experience with exotic animals while finishing her degree. Colleagues described her as detail-oriented and calm under pressure, qualities that served her well when handling unpredictable reptiles. She often arrived early to complete feeding preparations and habitat maintenance before the crowds arrived. The farm housed over 40 alligators ranging from juveniles to massive breeding adults. The largest was Samson, a 12-foot male weighing nearly 600 pounds, who'd been at the facility for 8 years. He lived in the main feeding pen, where tourists gathered twice daily to watch staff toss whole chickens into his enclosure. American alligators are among North America's most dangerous predators, capable of remaining motionless for hours before exploding into action. They can hold their breath underwater for up to an hour and strike with lightning speed when prey comes within range. Their bite force exceeds 2,100 pounds per square inch, among the strongest of any animal. Once they clamp down, they perform a death roll, spinning rapidly to disorient prey and tear flesh. That morning, Wendy arrived 30 minutes before her scheduled shift to clean Samson's feeding pen. The protocol was straightforward. Tap the edge of the enclosure with a long pole to flush out any hidden animals, then enter only after confirming their location. From her position near the gate, she could see Samson's massive form in his usual basking spot in the far corner, about 40 feet away. What Wendy didn't realize was that Samson had moved during the night. The alligator she'd spotted was actually a smaller female who'd claimed the sunny corner. Samson himself was lying motionless just beneath the surface of the feeding pool, his body perfectly camouflaged in the dark water. Wendy worked her way around the enclosure, her back turned to the water as she collected debris near the feeding platform. She was focused on a cluster of bones wedged between wooden planks when Samson made his move. The massive alligator surged upward from the pool with explosive force, water cascading from his armored hide as he launched himself toward the platform. His jaws clamped down on Wendy's left arm just above the elbow, his teeth puncturing through muscle and bone with crushing force. The impact knocked her sideways, but Samson's grip held firm. He immediately began his death roll, spinning rapidly in the shallow water while maintaining his bite. The rotational force was devastating, tearing ligaments, shattering bone, and severing major blood vessels in her arm. Wendy screamed as she was dragged into the water, her free hand clawing desperately at the wooden platform. But Samson's weight and momentum were overwhelming. He completed 3 full rotations before releasing his grip, leaving Wendy floating face down in the bloodied water. Her left arm had been completely severed just below the shoulder. A co-worker arriving for the morning shift heard the screams and rushed to the feeding pen. He found Wendy unconscious in the water, massive blood loss having already caused her to go into shock. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes, but Wendy had already lost too much blood to survive. The Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries conducted a thorough investigation, reviewing security footage and interviewing staff. They determined that Wendy had violated safety protocols by entering the enclosure alone and failing to confirm the location of all animals before beginning work. The facility was cited for inadequate supervision, but allowed to continue operating after implementing additional safety measures. Wendy's memorial service was held at a small church in Breaux Bridge, where family and friends remembered her passion for animals and her dream of becoming a wildlife veterinarian. Her parents established a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in veterinary medicine. Wendy's mistake was assuming she knew where the danger was hiding. For Kara Tilden, the danger came from rushing a medical procedure on a patient that wasn't fully sedated. It was October 6, 2017, and autumn had painted the mountains around Missoula, Montana, in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center sat on 50 acres of forested land, where injured and orphaned animals received medical care before being released back into the wild. The facility specialized in large predators, bears, mountain lions, and wolves, that required expert handling and specialized equipment. Kara Tilden had dedicated her life to wildlife rehabilitation. At 31, she was the center's lead animal behaviorist, with over 8 years of experience handling dangerous predators. Colleagues described her as empathetic and analytical, someone who could read an animal's stress levels and adjust her approach accordingly. But her compassionate nature sometimes led her to take risks that more cautious handlers avoided. The center's current patient was a 2-year-old grizzly bear cub named Kodiak, who'd been brought in with an infected paw wound after his mother was killed by poachers. At 180 pounds, he was no longer truly a cub, but his youth made him more unpredictable than an adult bear. Grizzly bears are among North America's most powerful predators, capable of running 35 miles per hour and possessing strength that can crush a bowling ball. Even young bears have claws up to 4 inches long and bite forces exceeding 1,200 pounds per square inch. Their defensive instincts are particularly strong when injured or confused, making medical procedures extremely dangerous. Sedation protocols exist for good reason. A partially conscious bear is far more dangerous than one that's fully alert. That afternoon, Kara prepared to check Kodiak's bandaged paw. The bear had been sedated 20 minutes earlier with a standard dose of ketamine and xylazine. Normal protocol required waiting 45 minutes for full sedation before entering the enclosure, but Kara was concerned about the infection spreading. The quarantine enclosure was a reinforced concrete room with steel bars and a heavy-duty lock system. Kodiak lay on his side near the back wall, his breathing slow and regular. His eyes were closed, and he showed no response to sounds from outside the enclosure. To Kara's experienced eye, he appeared fully sedated. Kara entered the enclosure carrying medical supplies and a fresh bandage. Kodiak remained motionless as she approached. His massive form sprawled across the concrete floor. She knelt beside his injured paw and began unwrapping the soiled bandage. The infection had worsened overnight, requiring immediate cleaning and stronger antibiotic treatment. Kodiak's eyes snapped open. The sedation hadn't fully taken effect. He was groggy and disoriented, but still capable of movement. The bear's first instinct was defensive confusion. He saw a human crouched beside him, touching his injured paw, and reacted with explosive violence. His massive paw swept across Kara's head with devastating force, his claws raking across her skull and face. The impact threw her sideways against the concrete wall, but Kodiak wasn't finished. Still confused and defensive, he lunged forward and pinned her beneath his weight, his jaws clamping down on her shoulder and neck. The bear's bite crushed vertebrae and severed major arteries in seconds. His claws continued to rake across her torso, tearing through clothing and flesh with each movement. Kara's screams echoed through the quarantine building, alerting staff in the main facility. Emergency staff arrived within 3 minutes, but Kodiak was still partially sedated but highly agitated, pacing around Kara's motionless body. They were forced to wait until additional sedation took effect before they could safely enter. By the time they reached Kara, she had already died from massive blood loss and trauma. The Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks Department conducted a comprehensive investigation. They determined that Kara had violated established safety procedures by entering the enclosure before full sedation was confirmed. The facility implemented stricter timing protocols and mandatory 2-person teams for all sedation procedures. Kara's memorial service filled the largest church in Missoula, where hundreds gathered to honor her dedication to wildlife conservation. Her family established the Kara Tilden Wildlife Fund, supporting education programs for aspiring rehabilitators. Kara's compassion led her to rush a procedure that needed more time. For Daryl Rohn, It was cutting corners on safety protocols that put him in the water with an unexpected predator. It was April 19, 2018, and the Florida sun blazed down on one of Orlando's most popular theme parks. Behind the scenes of the massive entertainment complex, a different world existed. One of maintenance tunnels, equipment rooms, and specialized facilities that kept the magic running smoothly. The park's Shark Tunnel attraction was a marvel of engineering, featuring a 500,000-gallon tank where visitors could walk through an underwater viewing tunnel, surrounded by dozens of sharks, rays, and tropical fish. Daryl Rohn had been working as a certified dive technician for 3 years. At 39, he was known for his technical expertise and calm demeanor underwater. His job involved maintaining the tunnel's lighting systems, cleaning viewing panels, and performing routine equipment checks in the massive tank. Colleagues respected his skills, but noted that he sometimes took shortcuts to complete tasks more efficiently. The shark habitat housed over 30 species, including several bull sharks, aggressive predators known for their territorial behavior and powerful bite. The tank was divided by retractable gates that could isolate different areas during maintenance work. Standard protocol required confirming all gates were properly secured before any dive operations began. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous sharks in the world, responsible for more attacks on humans than any other species except great whites. They can grow up to 11 feet long and weigh over 500 pounds, with bite forces exceeding 1,300 pounds per square inch. Unlike many shark species, bulls are highly territorial and aggressive, especially in confined spaces. They're also opportunistic feeders, attacking anything they perceive as prey or threat. That afternoon, Daryl was scheduled to replace a malfunctioning LED fixture in the tunnel's lighting array. The repair required diving to the bottom of the tank and working with underwater tools in close proximity to the viewing tunnel. His dive plan called for a 30-minute operation in the main display area, while the sharks were contained in the feeding section behind a retractable gate. Daryl suited up in his standard diving gear and performed his pre-dive safety checks. The control room confirmed that the sharks had been moved to the feeding area and the separation gate was in position. But what they didn't realize was that the gate's locking mechanism hadn't fully engaged, a mechanical failure that left a 6-inch gap at the bottom. Daryl descended into the crystal-clear water, his breathing apparatus creating a steady stream of bubbles as he made his way to the damaged light fixture. The lighting repair was more complex than expected. Corroded connections required careful cleaning and rewiring, work that demanded his full attention. Daryl had been underwater for 20 minutes when the first bull shark slipped through the gap in the separation gate. Bull sharks are ambush predators, capable of approaching prey with minimal disturbance. The shark circled the tank's perimeter, staying near the bottom where shadows from the tunnel structure provided camouflage. Daryl remained focused on his repair work, unaware that he was no longer alone in the water. The shark's first pass was investigatory, a slow circle around the diver to assess this unusual presence in her territory. On her second pass, the shark struck. She approached from behind and slightly below, her powerful jaws clamping down on Daryl's side just above his weight belt. Her teeth punctured through his wetsuit and into the soft tissue beneath. Daryl's safety tether snapped under the shark's thrashing movements. He tried to ascend, kicking desperately toward the surface while the shark maintained her grip. But bull sharks are incredibly strong, and her weight dragged him back down toward the tunnel floor. The shark released her initial bite only to attack again, this time targeting his legs and lower torso. Her powerful tail drove her forward with each strike, her jaws inflicting devastating wounds with surgical precision. Blood clouded the water around them, triggering the shark's feeding instincts. Surface staff monitoring the dive operation realized something was wrong when Daryl's air bubbles became erratic and his safety line went slack. Emergency protocols required clearing the tank of all marine life before rescue divers could enter, a process that would take precious minutes. By the time rescue divers reached him, Daryl had lost consciousness from blood loss and trauma. They managed to bring him to the surface, but his injuries were catastrophic. Multiple arteries had been severed, and the shark's powerful jaws had caused massive internal damage. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The theme park immediately closed the shark attraction and launched a comprehensive investigation. They discovered the faulty gate mechanism and implemented redundant safety systems to prevent similar failures. The incident remained largely out of public view, with the park's legal team working to minimize media coverage. Daryl's funeral was attended by dozens of dive technicians and theme park employees who understood the risks of working in such specialized environments. His family received a substantial settlement, and new industry standards were developed for underwater maintenance operations in marine attractions. Daryl's shortcut on safety protocols cost him his life in waters he thought were secure. For Nolan Hurst, it was his desire to connect emotionally with animals that led him to ignore warnings about working alone with dangerous primates. It was May 5, 2018, and the Northern California hills were green with spring growth, dotted with oak trees and wildflowers that stretched toward the Pacific coast. The Primate Rescue Center occupied 40 acres of rolling terrain, where dozens of retired research chimps, former pets, and rescued animals lived in spacious enclosures designed to mimic their natural habitat. The facility was a sanctuary for primates who couldn't be returned to the wild, providing them with social groups, enrichment activities, and specialized medical care. But beneath the peaceful setting lay constant reminders that these were powerful, unpredictable animals with complex social hierarchies and territorial instincts. Nolan Hurst was spending his summer as an intern at the sanctuary, gaining hands-on experience before starting his senior year as a biology major. At 22, he was idealistic and passionate about animal welfare, believing that emotional connections could bridge the gap between humans and other species. His supervisors appreciated his enthusiasm, but worried about his tendency to anthropomorphize the animals and ignore established safety protocols. He'd been warned multiple times about the dangers of working alone with the older male chimps, but his desire to form bonds often overrode his caution. The sanctuary housed 37 chimpanzees in various social groups, including several adult males who'd been retired from research facilities after decades of confinement. These animals carried psychological scars from their previous lives and could be unpredictably aggressive, especially toward unfamiliar humans. The largest was a 28-year-old male named Caesar, who weighed 140 pounds and had a history of territorial behavior. Despite his troubled past, Nolan believed he'd formed a special connection with the chimp during daily feeding routines. Chimpanzees are among our closest genetic relatives, but they're also incredibly dangerous animals. Adult males can be 5 times stronger than humans, with long arms, powerful hands, and canine teeth designed for fighting. They're highly intelligent and capable of using tools as weapons, but they're also driven by complex social instincts that can trigger sudden violence. In the wild, chimps engage in brutal territorial warfare, and captive animals retain these aggressive tendencies even after years of human contact. That afternoon, Nolan was part of a team cleaning the outdoor enclosures while the chimps were secured in their indoor facilities. The work involved removing old bedding, scrubbing feeding platforms, and restocking enrichment materials. Standard protocol required at least 2 staff members present whenever chimps were nearby, but as the day wore on, other team members finished their assignments and returned to the main building. Nolan stayed behind to complete the feeding preparation for Caesar's group. He developed a routine of sitting quietly near the enclosure after work, believing that this peaceful interaction helped build trust with the animals. His supervisors had explicitly forbidden this practice, but Nolan continued it whenever he thought no one was watching. Caesar's enclosure featured both indoor and outdoor areas, connected by a tunnel system with multiple gates and barriers. The chimp was supposed to be secured in the indoor facility, but a maintenance issue with one of the tunnel gates had left him access to a small intermediate area near the outdoor feeding station. From there, he could see and interact with humans through the chain-link fencing, but multiple barriers should have prevented any direct contact. Nolan approached the feeding station carrying a tray of fruit and vegetables. He could see Caesar in the intermediate area, sitting calmly near the fence with his hands resting on his knees. The chimp appeared relaxed, making soft vocalizations that Nolan interpreted as friendly greetings. Encouraged by this apparent connection, he decided to hand-feed Caesar through the fence, a direct violation of sanctuary rules. As Nolan passed pieces of fruit through the chain link, Caesar reached out with his long arms, accepting the food with what appeared to be gentle behavior. But chimps are master manipulators, capable of appearing calm while planning aggressive actions. Caesar had noticed a loose panel in the fencing, a maintenance issue that hadn't been reported, and was positioning himself to take advantage of it. When Nolan reached through the fence with a piece of banana, Caesar grabbed his sleeve with lightning speed. The chimp's grip was incredibly strong, and he immediately began pulling Nolan against the fence while reaching through the loose panel with his other hand. His fingers found Nolan's arm and clamped down with crushing force, his nails digging deep into flesh. Nolan screamed and tried to pull away, but Caesar's grip was unbreakable. The chimp began biting at Nolan's arm through the fence, his powerful jaws tearing through clothing and skin. The attack triggered aggressive behavior from 2 other chimps in nearby enclosures, who began screaming and throwing objects at the fence. Caesar managed to pull Nolan's entire arm through the loose panel, giving him access to inflict devastating damage. His teeth and nails tore through muscle and tendon, while his powerful hands twisted and bent Nolan's arm in unnatural directions. The young man's screams echoed across the facility, finally alerting staff in the main building. Sanctuary workers rushed to the scene with emergency equipment, including fire hoses and noise deterrents designed to break up chimp fights. But Caesar was in full aggressive mode, continuing his attack while the other chimps added to the chaos with their screaming and fence shaking. It took several minutes to drive Caesar back far enough to attempt a rescue. By the time they freed Nolan from the fence, his arm had been mangled beyond repair. Multiple arteries were severed, bones were shattered, and massive tissue damage had caused him to go into shock from blood loss. Emergency responders arrived within 12 minutes, but Nolan had already lost consciousness and showed no vital signs. He was pronounced dead at the scene, his injuries too severe for any chance of survival. The attack had lasted less than 5 minutes, but Caesar's strength and aggression had caused catastrophic damage that no medical intervention could have reversed. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife conducted a thorough investigation, reviewing security footage and interviewing all staff members. They determined that Nolan had violated multiple safety protocols and that the sanctuary's procedures were adequate when properly followed. The facility was required to repair the loose fencing and implement additional supervision measures. Nolan's memorial service was held at his college campus, where professors and fellow students remembered his passion for animal welfare and his dream of working in conservation. His parents established a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in wildlife biology, emphasizing the importance of safety training and protocol adherence. Thanks for watching. Just when you think these professionals learned too late that animals don't distinguish between work hours and feeding time, we're just getting started. Click the next video for the next stories that will show you why even the most experienced handlers can become prey in a split second.